Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's World, the podcast that helps parents go beyond surface level strategies and truly understand their teen's brain. Today, we're diving into a topic that so many parents of neurodivergent kids wrestle with: anxiety. How does it show up differently? What are we missing? And most important, how can we create an environment where our kids feel safe, supported, and understood? My guest today is Paulina, a trauma-informed certified speech and language pathologist, expert specializing in autism, ADHD. As a neurodivergent therapist based in New York City, Paulina has a deep understanding of how language, executive function, and emotional regulation all intersect. She helps parents shift their perspective on behavior, moving from managing to truly understanding their child's needs. We'll explore everything from perfectionism in kids with Asperger's, quote unquote, to the role of reducing anxiety, plus what research talks about co-regulation and how you can use it in your home. If you're a parent looking for science-backed, compassionate insights to help your neurodivergent teen thrive, this is the episode for you. Let's get started. Welcome, Paulina.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Can we start with, you are where you are. How did you get there? What is your mission here? What is your drive behind what you're doing right now?
I think it's important for parents to understand that the brain is developing all the time. And for me, as a professional and as a child who grew up not knowing that I was neurodivergent, I just thought that everybody had the same type of thought process that I did. And there were still so many misconceptions in terms of what neurodivergence is. I just knew that there were certain things that I was really good at, and I went into that direction. And I feel like the field of speech language pathology just found me. I didn't think that in high school, when you are picking your majors and what you want to study in college, it wasn't even on my radar. Interestingly enough, my mom is a special education teacher, and I thought that I would never work with children. Ever. Like, this is not what I want to do. So I decided, let me give finance a go. What a different world.
Yeah.
And again, I say that the field kind of found me because I started volunteering at a preschool. This was, over 20 years ago. And it just so happened that I stumbled onto a session. And from there, I realized that there's so much more and there are so many nuances when it comes to language. And I also knew early on that I was really good with words, but I didn't know what to do with that. I was and still am an avid reader. And what I know now about what my brain does with information is that I really quickly integrate everything that I read. And that's the reason I said that I thought that everybody thought this way. Because I take in information this way, doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
So again, I went into, undergraduate studies, had to switch colleges, switch my major. And I think I got really lucky in terms of where I wound up for my master's. And I think about it all the time. I reach out to my former professors, and it was really such a special place. And again, when I graduated, I also thought that everybody approaches the therapeutic model from this play-based perspective and really truly understands how play is inherent in everything that we do. And play looks different. This is what I tell parents of teens, that play looks different for a toddler than it does for an elementary school child than it does for a teen. And the thing is, though, that it's still play. We're looking at it from a different lens. And as I continued learning, I also realized that I just needed more and more information. And I kept going for, like you said, additional certifications in trauma to really understand how the kids who were showing up, what was the reason for those meltdowns or tantrums or what you want to call them. I knew that there was, I always knew that there was more because of the way that I was mentored. And I think it was important to dig even deeper. And that started and it continues to be my learning process of let's dive into the brain as much as possible. Let's dive into executive functioning. Let's dive into ADHD and autism. And I think I keep going. So every time I pick up new information, I do the integration part and then I present it in a way that parents can really grasp. And at the same time, also in a way that I can change maybe another professional's perspective.
That's really good. And I would love to just back up because you went from this was my superpower, disability, whatever you want to call it, to, and I went for my master's. So can you, first of all, alleviate some of the parents' stress about this is where my kid is at right now in grade 9. How are they ever going to get to university? What helped you to get to that point where you are able to go post-secondary, even with the disability, and shine?
I think it's important to know that every child has their own strengths. And that's something that I ask parents the first time that we have a call, because they're so used to calling in panic or in crisis and saying, these are all the things that are wrong. I need your help. And I take a pause and I go, thank you so much for calling. What's the best thing about your kid? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes them a moment because they're not expecting that question. Or tell me something else that your child is really, really good at. What is that thing? Because they might know and you might know, and yet no one's really connecting it for them. I think for me personally, I somehow was able to make those connections. And I want to say I also, attribute it to there were certain teachers, right? There's always that one educator or a couple of them that really hone into, like, here's this kid and she may seem different from the others, but there's something about this child. There's something about like this particular child. And I feel like for me, that was with a few of the teachers who I've had from elementary school and also in high school. And of course, there were some who didn't understand. And unfortunately, there are some who still don't. They still see neurodivergent kids as we need them to fit into the mold that we've created. And that's because it's just what they know. And I always say, like, you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And I really think it's finding, and I tell parents this too, find out one person. Your child needs that one safe person in that school. It might not even be their teacher that year. It could be a different teacher or an assistant or somebody else who they know gets them. It might even be the janitor, like somebody, right, who really gets them, who can ask them truly, what's going on for you today? Like, I really want to know. I'm not asking how you're feeling because I want the answer of I'm good. I'm asking, what's going on? Yeah. Tell me about what's happening for you today. And then that one offering really gives the child the opening. Even when I'm going to say, even when kids are younger and sometimes they feel like they have to hold themselves together. They have to hold themselves together in school. And sometimes they feel like they have to hold themselves together in therapy. And then finally, we hit the point where there's a release, and then they start to cry. And sometimes parents look at me shocked, and all I do is I signal for them to, like, just embrace it. Just embrace it. Don't ask questions. This is amazing. This is such a great release. Like,
Mhm.
how awesome is it that your child feels safe enough to have that kind of experience here? And I've had teens also melt down here. There was a conversation between parents that I overheard in the waiting room. And one of the parents was saying, "Oh, the noises that you hear, excuse that, that's my teen having a tantrum." And the other one said, "This is the best place to have it." She was like, "If you're going to have it anywhere, this place where you are right now is probably the best place that you can have it." And the feedback that I also get from teens, and again, this depends on the language capacities and the type of understanding that they are starting to have about their brain and what it does and how it works. I've had them say, "You're the only one who gets all parts of me."
Mm.
How great is that? And for me, I'm going, "Oh, I kind of wish I had that as a teen too."
Yeah.
Somebody, an adult, to say, "I could lose it in front of you and you're not going to hold it against me."
I love that. And I love when you talk about exhaustion, for the years that I spent in high school and kids were, holding it together in school, and then they would get home and the parents would be like, they won't do their homework, they won't touch this, they're throwing their books. But if you think about it, especially when they get to high school, I think they are really able to inherently see their differences,
Yes.
and they're not fitting into that mold, as you say. And if you can imagine, you as an adult, you are, I don't know, a copywriter, but someone has said, "No, you need to go into finance and you need to look at these numbers and you need to figure out this spreadsheet." Well, I'm telling you from my experience, because if you put numbers in a spreadsheet in front of me, I'm having a full out meltdown. I break out in hives. I start twitching because I can't. So, and I think we've all been in situations where we're sitting there all day going, "This is taking everything I have because I can't fall apart in front of my colleagues. I can't fall apart in front of a big family function. This is taking every ounce of everything I have. So when I get home, let this be my safe space. Screw the homework for
Yep.
now. Screw those expectations about cleaning their room. Let them have that release." I think that is so important that you said that, because I think we really underestimate that part of it. And I think a part of that is, as it's coming to me, is too, when we have kids who are neurodivergent in any way, we have to look at, they might be 16, they might be 15, but if they have autism or ADHD or any other neurodiversity, they are really socially or even emotionally, it could be 5 years younger. So when I talk to parents saying, "Oh, he's 18 years old and he won't pick up his room and he won't put dishes in the dishwasher," and you have to go, "Okay, let's back up. What would you expect from him in the house when they were 14? You sure wouldn't be expecting all of those things. And you need to start from there to build those skills." I'm not saying never to expect it, but if we can always keep, our lens on that our kids emotionally or socially are so much younger when it comes to this. Can you speak to that as well?
I can. And I think that's the hardest part. I call it it's the expectation gap. And it's also matching expectation to capacity.
Yeah.
And I know there are some days for myself that are higher capacity days. And they're higher capacity because I've slept well, I've exercised, my nutritional intake is on point, I'm ready to go. And then there are other days that are much lower capacity days. where I don't want to interact with anybody outside my office. When I'm going home at night, I don't want to make any phone calls. It's not that I don't enjoy talking to my friends or family. It's more about I've recognized where I cap at my capacity. And I also teach kids and parents that type of terminology for them to realize, what can you handle today? What can you take on? Because is this a challenge kind of day? Meaning I'm going to introduce something new to you. It's going to be hard. You might lose it. Can you already handle knowing that you're going to be in discomfort? And there are some days that kids will say, lay it on me. I
Yeah.
got this. Okay, whatever this new thing, new idea that you have, I am so thrilled and I want to see what it's about. And other days, just by the look, they go, you're joking, right? Like, you actually think that I'm going to participate in this? Absolutely not. And it's so easy to say that they're being defiant or they're avoiding it, right? Avoidance comes also, even that term, it comes from somewhere, right? They can't handle the discomfort in that moment. It doesn't mean that the challenge isn't going to come back. And I tell them that also. I go, well, right now, you just advocated for yourself. You just said that you've had such a long day that all you want to do is you want to build train tracks. Let's do it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the thing. Right? It's not about the trains. It's not about the board game. It's about what comes through and what comes out of it. And that's the other part where even with that gap, right, that social emotional piece, like you mentioned, so it exists, it's going to exist. And it's not about teens, which is also so important. It's not about them catching up. Right? Parents also ask, well, when are they going to catch up? And then the question becomes, catch up to what? Like, what's the race?
Yeah.
Right? They're going to grow into their own skills. Right? They're not going to grow out of autism. They're not going to grow out of ADHD. They're going to grow into these skills. And even for older kids, when we talk about what a diagnosis is, right? Like, what is that label? And some of them, I get that this is my ADHD, however they want to call it. And some of them know that they take medication in the morning, right? Because this helps me figure out the school day. And then, interestingly enough, sometimes they get an additional diagnosis of autism. And then when I say, so that they're also, just like they're ADHD adults, they're also autistic adults. And I kid you not, one of my kids sat back and went, this is forever?
Wow.
He goes, I just thought it was like something for now and it'll go away. Okay, so now we have to have a different conversation. Instead of saying, this is such an amazing thing, aren't you so lucky, to go, well, you just heard something from me. Again, what was it like for you knowing that this is a part of you? So now we're going to see what other parts of you there are. And it really is all about, I want to say, like, the nuances in the language. Yeah. Because we could all be saying similar things to kids, to parents, and yet when you change certain terms and use like really specific words, and this is where my background in language comes in, and just also my affinity for words, knowing how a certain phrase is going to land on somebody else. Because I could say something to one parent and be really direct, and they know that I'm coming, of course, from a place of warmth and compassion, and they need the directness. Mm-hmm. And then for somebody else, I have to go through a different door. I have to sidestep it a little bit and let them get to the point where I want them to be. And it's the same thing for kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And when we talk about, even you mentioned avoidance and defiance, and you know, I hear so many parents and even educators say, oh, this is just their way of getting their way. This is their way of
Yep.
pushing my buttons. They know what buttons to push on you and what buttons to push on me. Listen, these behaviors are secondary. They are just a form of communication to say, I'm not meeting your expectation, and I don't know how to meet your expectation. I can't even meet my expectation. And so this is how I'm telling you. So it's never, kids do well when they can. People do well when they can, not when they feel like it, not when they want, more screen time. I feel like if we can always think about that, no kid wants to melt down in school in front of their friends. No kid wants that. But sometimes it's inevitable because the communication piece is there. And I'm always very sensitive to teenagers because they're so much more aware
Yes.
of the mold they're not fitting in, of the expectations they're looking at their friends who are, having dates and going to parties and not getting invited, or, all of that. Like, how, if we can sit back and go, oh my God, that must be so hard. What do you need? As opposed to, oh, here we go. You just wanted a hamburger for dinner instead of chicken. I mean, it's that piece. If we can keep remembering that behavior is not manipulation or any of those things, I think that lends a little more compassion to how we have our conversations with our teens, for sure.
Absolutely. And sometimes I've asked kids, what do you need? And those of them who have, language, because some of the kids, the younger ones I work with, don't have as much language yet. Some of them have said, right now, I just need you to stop talking.
Yeah.
And I go, amazing. Absolutely. And I need you to just back up. Got it.
Yeah. Well, even at home, if you're thinking about your kid at home, how effective is the nagging and the whole ping pong conversation? I need you to do this. I'm not doing that. Da, 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 da. Like, how effective is that? It's not. When sometimes they've had input all day long, and I can totally feel that. They've had input all day long, then they get home and you are listing the 75 things they didn't do before they left for school. Is there another way? Could you just put a Post-it note up? Could you just put a checklist up and avoid that whole? Because that's I think, I don't know if you agree with me, where a lot of this like conflict comes from. It's just, please, I don't even hear what you're saying. Just stop talking. It's like listening to CPS 24 loop news or Fox News or whatever, and that's all you hear is input, and you just like, please mute. I just want to mute my mother right now.
Exactly. And it's also letting teens know that this is what advocacy is like. Right? So if they tell you, I need you to go away, in that moment, that's not a moment for you to come back to them and say, can you tell that to me nicely, whatever that word means? Or, I need you to find another way, like, or be respectful, which is also just so broad. In that moment, take it as it is and go, I hear you and I get what you're saying. We're going to come back together at another time.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned before in terms of that ping pong and the back and forth, I think it's important for parents to figure out what kind of conversation are you having?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the conflict for parents and kids, and also this goes into what I do parent coaching between parents, is that they're having different conversations. And I go, do you notice that your child came to you with a problem, but the thing is, they're not asking for a solution. And you jumped to solving it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the parent's mind, it goes, well, they asked me, so of course I'm going to give them all of this information, and I want them to figure it out. And I said, yes, they asked you on the surface. And I said, underneath it, they actually don't want you to fix it. They want you to know that they're having a really hard time with something that they can't quite figure out.
Mhm.
You telling them, oh, I know this. This is easy. I did this back in, when I was your age. Now they're feeling ashamed for even coming to you.
Yeah.
You've now just revealed their biggest weakness. And instead of holding them in their space of vulnerability, you started offering them all of this advice that they never requested.
Yeah. And when kids are coming to you with these things, there is your opportunity to collaborate with them. Because if you think in any sense, as an adult or as a kid, if you are part of the solution, if you are creating your own solution, it makes so much more sense rather than going through the 10 things mom checked off or the 10 things dad checked off that don't work. And as soon as they start rhyming off the solutions, your kid is shutting down. But if you
Yes.
find a way to have these conversations where they are able to contribute to the solution and, yeah, you know what, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, no problem. We'll go back to the drawing board because not everything is going to work.
That's exactly it. And it really goes back to, how do you get into the mind of your child?
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason that what makes me, I guess, so good at what I can do is that I can get into the mind of a 2-year-old, just how I can get into the mind of a teen. And instead of telling them to take perspective and say, how do you think the other person feels? What I always say is, how about we take their perspective first? Seek their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What happened there for you? Tell me what else is going on. And then you recast it back to them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what I'm hearing you say is this. How am I doing? Am I on track? And it really keeps the conversation going. Because if you only ask yes, no questions, you're going to get yes, no answers. And then you're just going to get your run of the mill, good, fine, bad, I don't know, a lot of I don't knows. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you're asking me.
Yeah. And if we're digging, when we assume what the problem is and we're not asking, and even when we ask, we get the first question. Well, can you dig a little deeper? Well, what was hard about that? Well, how did that make you feel? What would make it, like, really digging? And sometimes, there's that, you think what the surface issue is, the actual conflict for them is like 10 layers deep.
Yes.
And sometimes it's such a tweak. It's okay, you don't have time to get your gym uniform on in that amount of time for the change room. And it's got nothing to do with I hate gym and I hate the people in my class and I want to punch them all. And, it's like dig, like drill down for those answers. Take the time in the right space, in the right frame of mind to drill down, because we just never know where this anxiety is coming from. And that's where I want to really dive into the anxiety, because this is so prevalent, especially in our teens. And I say especially in our teens because I work with teens. I tried the elementary route and I did my first recess and I had my first snotty nose on my sleeve and I was out. Off to high school I go. So let's talk about anxiety and how does that present differently in a neurodivergent kid compared to a neurotypical kid?
So anxiety is such an interesting topic. And I think it's also important to understand that there's a difference between fear and anxiety.
Say more.
They get looped together. So it's something that, first of all, it's something that all of us experience and all of us have, because like neurotypical, neurodivergent or not, we all have states of fear because our brain was designed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It was designed to have that fear spike because our brain senses that something dangerous is coming. And then when that danger passes, then the fear subsides. So that's typically how it's supposed to go for neurotypical brains. For neurodivergent brains, the brain is pretty much on high alert, more so.
Mm.
And it's constantly attempting, just like you said, there's all this information and stimuli coming in from the environment. And your brain is working overtime, figuring out what to do with all of it. Even for kids who get diagnosed with ADHD, it's not that they can't attend, it's that they attend to everything.
Mm.
And it's so much input and it's so much information that, of course, there's exhaustion by the end of the day because they have to work double, triple, quadruple the amount of time and have to put so much effort into distinguishing between what is relevant to me right now and what isn't. And then sometimes they look at their friends who just get through the material so much faster and they go, how do I not know how to do this?
Yeah.
And then comes the comparisons. So the anxiety part is where language comes in. So the language that and that's where the self-talk comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So when the language is what keeps the anxiety going. So that's really such a huge difference. Like we all have fear centers. We all have emotion centers. And for neurodivergent kids, they are just more exacerbated. And those are the areas where, especially when there's burnout, and that's such an important topic because when I mention it to parents, even of younger kids, they go, oh, this is what it looks like, where like we've made progress, and then we hit this snag, usually around the winter season,
Mm-hmm.
where they have had enough. And every little thing is bothering them. And parents are going, what is going on? And I said, what you're witnessing is burnout. Just how adults experience burnout, so do kids. And more so autistic and ADHD kids.
Yeah.
And when that burnout hits, it is so incredibly, like, it's painful for the parents to watch. And I say, can you imagine how painful it is for your kid?
Yeah.
So instead of saying, let's push through and let's just tell them that there's nothing to worry about, which is probably the worst advice that you can give,
Mm-hmm.
or just saying, well, that worry is just small. How do you know? Because for me, this is the biggest thing that could have possibly happened. From you, that's your adult lens. That's your 40, 50 years of experience going, this is not a big deal. You get over it. For the child in that moment, who now is talking himself or herself like through the panic that they're experiencing, and then their self-talk becomes even more negative. And it becomes fueled with, I'm a failure. I'm never going to get this. This is the worst subject. I hate my teachers. I hate school. I'm never going back. Sometimes I hate you. You're the worst. I'm never coming back here. And I sit there and the parents are going, how do you take it?
Hmm.
And for me, I go, yes. So it's not my child. So I don't have as much emotional investment as you. However, I'm also emotionally invested in their well-being. And I know that it's not personal.
Yeah.
I know, like you said, the words, they're just surface. It is not a personal attack on me. They don't really hate me. And then in that moment, this is the release that they need. Because then they do come back the next time. And sometimes there's this sense of embarrassment that comes up where they think that they should apologize for something and they're not sure what that is. So oftentimes I hear, so I just want to say, I'm sorry about the thing that happened. And this is such an amazing opportunity for me to accept their apology.
Mhm.
So I've had kids like tear through my waiting room and then go, so you know that thing that happened last week? They go, oh, what thing do you mean? You know, the thing that happened. I just want to say I'm sorry for that. And then for me, I go, I'm so glad you mentioned it. I really appreciate your apology. You're right. It did take me a while to put the waiting room back together. That's an acceptance of an apology.
Yes.
Because when it comes to that embarrassment, right, and that anxiety, they're coming in and they're having this reaction of what they think my answer is going to be like. And then they get compassion instead.
And when parents get this apology, I think sometimes they can launch into, oh, thanks for the apology because blah, 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 blah. Next time, blah, 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 blah. And instead of just saying,
Yes.
thank you, I appreciate it. Maybe, yeah, took a while to clean up the dishes. But I think that's really important because it will build that trust that they can recognize something went wrong and apologize for it. And you are the safe space for that.
Absolutely. Because then with anxiety comes lying.
Yes.
I feel like we could do a whole other segment on just the reason that lying comes through and where it comes from. And it doesn't just come up all of a sudden when kids are teens. It's something that's been happening for them earlier on where they don't feel like they can tell you anything because they're going to be hit with reprimands and consequences and punishments all the time.
Mhm.
And what you do want is for them to come to you and say, I messed up. Like as a teen. And I say this to parents of 5-year-olds too. I go, 10 years from now, when they make a really big mistake, do you want them to come to you and you be their first call and for them to say, I need you?
Mhm.
I messed up, or I'm learning to drive and I crashed. I just want to tell you I'm okay. I need you. Like mom, dad, please, I need you. You want that instead of them thinking, oh man, mom, dad, they're going to kill me. I have to cover it up. I have to figure out what else I could do. Maybe I'll call my friend who knows just as much as I do, which is not that much.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to attempt to fix it myself because I have this fear that my mom, my dad, or whoever the caregiver is going to say, how could you do this? How could you be so irresponsible? How
Mhm.
did you not remember that all the things I taught you? And for parents, it's coming from, and I say this often, I go, so right now it doesn't sound like a kid problem. That sounds like a you. That sounds like your embarrassment
Mhm.
of, I wasn't a good enough parent. I didn't teach them all that. You've done all the things. And you continue to figure out like how best to parent. There's no such thing as perfect. It doesn't exist. And
Mhm.
yeah, you're learning and you're figuring out along the way. And as the adult, you're going to mess up too because you're supposed to. And if your kids only see this version of you that never messes up and that never makes mistakes, they go, oh man, I'm never supposed to mess up. I'm never supposed to make mistakes. So that when I do, here comes the the fear comes and then instantaneously it's like anxiety transformation,
Mhm.
that voice in the back of their head, instead of saying, you got this, you've been through this before, you're able to figure it out because you have the skills. Okay, here we go. Like giving yourself a pep talk. That's a skill versus they go right into the negative.
Yeah.
I'm the worst kid. My parents are going to know that I'm the worst kid. I'm an embarrassment. I'm a failure. How could I ever do this? And then what happens? They get home and that's the dialogue that they hear. This is embarrassing. How could you? And then how could you do this to me?
Yes.
How could you do this to me? How could you embarrass me like that?
Bingo. Yeah. You know, and I know we need to wrap up, and I actually would really love to do an entire episode online, because if you go through the Facebook groups for parents that are, you know, that is an underlying, very prevalent problem that they're talking about. And so I would just love for you to come back and we can just do all about lying, because
All about lying.
I think the Pinocchio episode would be really good. So Paulina, just let me know here. Tell our listeners how we can find you, how we can work with you. I really appreciate your being here. I love the work that you're doing. I love all the information you've shared today. And I'm
Thank
sure the
you.
listeners are like, oh, I might want to get a hold of this girl.
So I am on Instagram and Facebook at Play to Learn Consulting. My website is also playtolearnconsulting.com, and it has all the different ways that you could reach out to me. There's ways to book a call. I have a newsletter, so there's a way to sign up for my newsletter and you get on the email list, and I welcome you in, and then you receive bi-weekly newsletters with information that's really relevant and things that I discuss or that I talk about that really impacts parents every day, whether you're a parent of a teen or you're a parent of a younger child, because they're going to grow up and they're also going to be a teen.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's information for everybody.
Thank you for that. I just love this. It's such good information. I feel like there might be 3 more episodes, because we really want to dive into the play aspect
Yes.
for teenagers. So we'll get there. We'll get there. I feel like this is almost like a series. Which
It could be.
Yeah. So I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined. Everything that you hear today will be in the show notes. If you want to get a hold of Paulina or myself for some information, feel free to do so. And thanks for stopping by.